understand that. And even to those of you who may not necessarily be believers, I want to extend that message to you. And we all have a responsibility to speak up. We all should be entering the conversation now, more than ever. It is in everybody's calling to honor Christ and to be good shepherds in the lives of those around us, for as long as we are on this earth. It is written that we know in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. We need to ensure that Charlie's legacy is not going to die with him. It's going to live on then longer than any of us. I ask those of you who are in this room with me, before you leave this room today, open the Bible, open your home, open your mouths, speak truth, even when it costs you. You are called to protect children, even when the world accuses you of heinous things. We must pray for the confused, for the hurting and the lost, and then go meet them where they are at. And one day, we must build families, build churches, and build the communities around us that will refuse to bow to the idols of our age. And I'll make you all a promise, as I'll make this promise to God. I'm going to keep showing up, whether it be at hearings, whether it be in court, whether it's at our school or in our culture. I am going to keep showing up until every child is safe and the medical industry that has harmed our young people is held to account. All things work together for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And with that, in the spirit of Charlie, let's continue the conversation. I invite you all to line up and be as part of it.
How you doing, Chloe? I just wanted to say thank you for coming here and just carrying on Charlie's legacy. It's the most courageous thing you could do. Like he said, courage is something that we should all embody.
And it's contagious.
100%.
When one person speaks up, many others can follow.
Yes, ma'am. So I just want to say my name's Mason. I'm a student here. I've been a student athlete here. I haven't always been into politics, but the guy that got me into it was Charlie. Not because he thrived in it so well, but because even just me as an athlete, seeing how I could implement my faith and inspire people or just be a good example in front of people in whatever realm, and the fact that he did that in something as controversial as politics, I thought was awesome. But I just wanted to say I went to the event in Glendale. I saw you were there as well at the memorial, so I just kind of wanted to ask you what your experience was like with that and how it impacted you, just kind of the heaviness and weight of all that.
It's been a heavy 2 weeks for me, for everybody who knew him personally, and I think even for the millions of people who never even knew him. A lot of people all across the country, all over the world, have been mourning him. Even though they may not have known him, because he was such a familiar cultural icon of freedom, of truth, and most importantly, of compassion and meeting other people where they're at, even in the midst of disagreement. It hasn't been easy, especially with how his death has been televised. I think a lot of us have seen the moment where he met God. We've seen the people, even the people around us, millions celebrating it happening. And it can be really disheartening in a time like this. But what has really helped me during this time is, before the memorial, and pretty much as soon as I got home, which I wasn't even in the country when I got the news about it happening, I decided that I was going to drive to Arizona. I was going to visit Turning Point just to see how everybody was faring. And what I saw was incredible. Nobody was stopping. Nobody was stopping or cowering. They were afraid. They were grieving, of course. But they were working twice, thrice, 4 times, 5 times as hard before they were before. And I'm really confident that Turning Point, and especially with Erica in charge, that they're going to carry the movement forward incredibly well and with due honor to Charlie. I think that there's a lot of hope going forward. But I think in order to keep that hope going, we all have to get involved, and we all have to work 5 times as hard as we were before.
Yeah, and because I flew out there with my dad, and I'm telling everybody, not just because I like Charlie and not just because I support Turning Point. I even went to the Turning Point headquarters with all the memorial stuff out there, and the one thing I'm telling people is it felt like a deafening silence because it was so quiet there, but because of the impact and just how loud it was around the world, that's just what it felt like. I don't know why those words came into my head, but that event honestly was the most powerful thing I've ever seen in my life. So I guess one last thing to ask, what do you think about just kind of Erica's message and how someone that goes through something that gnarly can say, I forgive him? Because I honestly wasn't expecting that, and I think even just me personally, any hate that I had in my heart towards the whole situation kind of just evaporated the second she said that. Because it's like Christ says, like, you can be angry, he flipped tables in righteous anger, but just kind of getting rid of that hate and saying, I forgive you, like how do you think that impacted even just Christians?
Seeing that moment live, I couldn't believe it. I mean, I could, but it takes a great deal of strength. A great deal of strength and faith in God to get to that level of forgiveness. To look at the young man who murdered your husband and say, in spite of what you've done, I forgive you. And I think many of us, we are angry, we are livid in the wake of what they have done to him, in the way that they have demonized not just the conservative movement, but I think anybody who speaks for truth, for open discussion. But we have to keep that same attitude. I think she is exemplary of the perfect attitude that we all must hold with us right now. We have to move forward with openness in our hearts, in our minds, in our mouths. We have to move forward with compassion, with love for those around us, and forgiveness. And it's not going to be easy, but that's why we have God to call on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, Chloe. Nice to meet you. I wanted to ask you if you have any information about male detransitioners, and that is because in my limited research of detransitioners, I feel like a lot of them tend to be female. I I can assume that that tends to be because of like possible fears or motherhood. And so, do you have any information about male detransitioners and why they choose to?
So I have quite a few male detransition friends, but it is true that the vast majority of detransitioners that we tend to see, both like privately within detransition circles and in the media, they tend to be women. And we don't know exactly why, because there's so little research that has been done and so little academic research, literature on detransition in general. But especially historically, before the massive wave in the last decade of people beginning to identify as transgender and medically transition, it was actually mostly adult men and young boys who were experiencing feelings of incongruence or deep discomfort or trauma around their sex bodies. But in the last decade, it has mostly been young women, mostly pre-adolescents, teenagers, and in the 20s to early 30s range, going through the gender clinic system. And I think that it's partly just a demographic issue because of that, but also in general. And one thing that I actually learned during my experience of basically going undercover under the guise of a young man's identity is that I think that there's a lot less forgiveness for men when they make mistakes, when they make massive personal mistakes in their lives, especially if it involves having hurt themselves or others. And so there's a lot more, for a man, there's a lot more shame around being emasculated, especially physical emasculation, having lost your male physical traits or fertility, than there is, I think, for women who have been defeminized in different ways. So there's less of a cultural openness, I think, and just less room for these young men who have been hurt to find solace, to find peace, and to find community.
Can you talk a little more about that history of men having trouble identifying with their bodies that you spoke of a second ago?
I mean, the very first few instances, and I think the vast majority of men going through these early gender clinics in the last century, I mean, there really weren't any female patients who were going through these systems. But I think that the reason why now that we see why we are seeing such a reversal of that with the sexes is because I think the modern transgender ideology preys upon a lot of the natural discomfort that women tend to go through as they go through puberty, as they go through just the distress of realizing that one day you're no longer going to be a girl, you're going to be a woman. There's a lot of responsibility and there's a lot of change in our bodies and in our lives that comes with that. There's a lot of natural fears and reservation that comes with that, especially for those of us who grew up as tomboys and may not always feel like we fit in with other women.
It seems like,
and I think it's in the way that eating disorders, in the way that body dysmorphia and plastic surgery procedures have been prevalent mostly among young women, this has sort of become the next step for that.
forgive me for my opinion, I do think maybe females who would desire a male body, maybe it's from like being very aware of our bodies early on due to fetishization.
Being more aware of our bodies?
I do think that young girls, they are more aware of their sexual aspects sooner than men are. Because they're fetishized, and I think that also leads to a desire to be fetishized amongst some trans women, or
Like
male.
are you saying like there's some women who seek to transition because of a desire to be seen in that sexual light? Or
I can
to
only
escape
speak
it?
from my experience with some friends of mine who transitioned and also detransitioned. The few that transitioned to female, they go very hard on like the playing it up.
Oh, are you talking about
Yeah.
like the men who are entering into a female
Yeah.
lifestyle?
Yes, and then most of my friends who transition to present male, they are more toned down
Right.
because there's not like something to play up, I suppose. And
So
so I wonder if it's like maybe I'm getting a little off track. I'm having fun talking to you.
So you're to get this right, you're saying that a lot of men who transition into a female identity, some of them may have like a sexual component of that to fulfill like a sexual desire to be seen that way
And
sexually.
I can
or
only
that,
speak from my experience. Yeah. So I live
And
in
the-
Austin, and I'm surrounded by it pretty often. And I know there's plenty of like people who, men who transition to present female who like are just it's something in them that they just want to like look a certain way. But there's some that they like use it as like an identity marker because there's like a fear in them. Maybe it's just me presenting. I'm just like throwing out something here that's deeply sociological that I can't figure out.
Yeah, what you're actually speaking to is actually a phenomenon with a lot of documented literature on it. There are a few theories and a few archetypes of mostly men who transition. Those who are transitioning for or experience the incongruence with their sex body for sexual reasons are known as autogynephiles. But there's also a cohort of men who don't have any sexual desire that are involved with that, but many of them are speculated to either be on the autistic spectrum or they also experience homosexual attractions. Whereas I think in the opposite sex with women, I think you're also right about that. There are a lot of the women and the girls who transition often have some form of sexual trauma, having been assaulted, especially in their childhood, or having had early exposure to either pornography or a feeling of being objectified and being looked at from an adult lens from a very young age and wish to escape that. And I mean, that speaks to my own experience as somebody who very early on in my transition was sexually assaulted, went through puberty early, and so had that kind of uncomfortable attention.
Are you speaking about someone who detransitioned back to female or back to male?
Well, I'm actually speaking about my own experience.
Okay, sorry.
But I know a lot of young women who have experienced those same reservations and discomfort.
I got you. I guess before I go, I would like to know, you said you have some friends that detransitioned back to male. What was it that inspired them to do that so?
That's a good question, because everybody's story and motivations and the way that they get there it's different. But when I think about the detransitioned men who I am closest to, I mean, think about a particular friend of mine. He actually had spiritual motivations in doing so. He was raised in the Christian faith, and that was something that he really grappled with in his adolescent years. But towards the end of his transition, he started to realize that he was stuck in a cycle of addiction. Not just with substance abuse, but the way that his dysphoria presented. Even as he went further into the transition process, he kept realizing that there's further to go. There's this goal I have that is unattainable. This is not actually making me happy. It's wrecking my life. And I am going against the word and the creation and the will of God in doing this. And so it was just an eventual wrestling with his faith, and also with the material damages that were happening to him and to his body and in his life and in his relationships that led him to decide to stop going through this transition. And I think the overall spirit of that, realizing over time that damage is being done to your body and in your personal life, is what leads most detransitioners to make that choice.
I got you. Yeah, a lot of my friends who have become trans, their journey was led there, all from different stories. But if I could identify it as like a particular, in a particular sentence that each of their stories had in common, I would say that it was like a disillusion with the groups that they were involved with.
So social disillusion.
Yeah, like you said, abuse. One of them was a lesbian who had issues with like being in the military, and then of course like high school groups where you just don't feel like you belong, and you travel towards the group that's like, come to us, you know. And that friend I'm just speaking about, she actually recently detransitioned and has a healthy baby, so I'm really happy for her.
Good for her.
But anyway, thank you for answering my questions.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi, I'm nervous as I
And
can
just
be.
just as a preemptive thing, would you mind speaking a little bit closer to the
Yes,
microphone?
yeah,
I don't know
sure.
if
Oh my
there's like a way
goodness,
to
there we go,
adjust
there
it.
I think I'm a little too tall.
And if we could maybe adjust the audio levels a little bit on the microphone as well.
Okay. All right. Is this good? I don't know. Okay. All right. So I had a few kind of questions. I saw that you were coming here probably about like 3 days ago, and I was like, I want to figure out what's going on, kind of thing. So essentially, one of the big things that I wanted to look into was data points on just how many people that have detransitioned have also been looking for justice for basically what the response was. I saw, prior to kind of looking into you and seeing like your story, I saw a lot of similar stories on, there's a law firm that's called Transition Justice, and they essentially were like the parents, the kids, saying about how like the medical field was essentially like telling them like the entire, oh, your child is suicidal kind of thing, without actually consulting that child. So I
Right,
think,
so you're talking about the suicide myth that doctors use to
Yes.
essentially rope parents into consent to writing, giving their written consent for this.
yeah. And I think for me, what I'm confused about is like right now we don't have, while I was doing research, I couldn't find any data points on just how many people are actually coming forward to try to contest this. But what I could find was through, it's called JAMA Network Cohort Study, I guess. From 2016 to 2020, there were 3,678 surgeries for kids age 12 to 18 that was gender-affirming care. That's the closest comprehensive study that I've been able to find so far.
There's also, I work with a medical nonprofit called Do No Harm Medicine, and
Okay.
they actually are running a website
Okay.
that is compiling public insurance data from all 50 states.
Okay.
That includes that has information on like the procedures they had, at which hospitals they went to.
Yeah.
Overall costs and things like that, and it's called the Stop the Harm database. So I highly suggest that
Yeah.
you make a note of that.
And I'm so sorry, what was the name of it one more time?
Stop the Harm database.
Stop the Harm database. Okay, cool. All right. And then the other question that I wanted to kind of get into, because I know you kind of spoke on it a few times in the past. Peace. There we go. So a big thing that I noticed, especially growing up and also just hearing your story, I very much relate to like having social media constantly being there. That's something that we all like, we have these unfair comparisons of what we expect, like for you, like looking at a woman and feeling like not necessarily like you're meeting the expectation kind of thing. And for me, like I had a very similar instance as a guy looking online and being like, I don't feel like I'm manly kind of thing. Like I was short, skinny, I'm still skinny, but so I think as far as that goes, there's a lot of push to basically be like, oh, you're unhappy with yourself? Okay, then you should change this about you. But do you think there's anything we could do, especially in school systems, to kind of contest the school boards and be like, can we have a system where we can actually have kids understand they can be confident in who they are and they don't need to look for affirmation online? Because I think that's something that's not spoken about, but it's like a well understood thing by our generation.
For sure. I think that we have responsibility to get as involved as possible in our communities, especially in regards to our education system, and going to just attending school board meetings, being there, listening into everything, and coming up to speak, and even running for a position, I think are pretty important to not only getting the conversation forward, but also affecting change in one's community and for your school. And I mean, it's already like you said, like a lot of us go through what I think is a very common formative experience of just looking at people around us, but especially now on social media, where people post the best versions of themselves, only the best moments of their lives, or the moments that at least they want you to see, and think, man, why aren't I living like that? Why aren't I like them? We don't see what they don't want us to. And in a sense, it gives us, especially for those of us who may not have very strong or very close role models in our lives, some semblance of a role model to look to, but it's one that, I mean, we can't just be looking to our peers alone for help, especially when we're very young and we're going through the experience of adolescence. I think as much as we have to get involved in our school system and in our communities, the real healing for the next generations starts in the home. It starts with the mother, the father, and the family unit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last thing is just, I think after seeing kind of your story and like everything that you've gone through, after detransitioning, do you feel like, especially just speaking out about it, have you felt like more confident in like you as a woman kind of thing, like from where you're at now kind of thing? Like, yeah, I don't know.
For sure. I mean, when I first started speaking out, I was the most awkward woman ever. Like, I already was kind of poorly socialized. Like, I had just come out of like my senior year of high school. I was basically a shut-in, just spending all my time like in my room, playing video games all day, just trying to like avoid reality, especially after everything that happened to me. But I just felt this calling to go forth into the world and speak about what happened to me and speak for the good of my family, honor my mom and dad and what they've been through, and fight for the next generations and to better the world. And it's just been a total trial by fire.
Yeah.
I used to say, I have social anxiety, I don't want to talk to people, but I've realized if you want to get better, you have to challenge your fears. You have to face the music head on.
Yeah.
And I've overcome things through God. I can't give myself too much credit. That I never thought I would before. And through overcoming some of the worst parts of my life, and through going through the difficulties of entering into the adult world, the public speaking world, it's really built me up in my soul.
Yeah.
And for that, I'm very grateful. I'm taking better care of myself than ever, just not just emotionally and in my faith, but you know what's really funny is that
And so I'm glad I was in the area, 30 minutes away, right? But still able to come down. And, I've been a fan for a while. And so I do have a few questions. There's a few. But it seems to me that a lot of times today's youth, are kind of caught up in what it means to be part of a social group. And so what will happen, is sometimes, if you find yourself with a thing that differs from your friends in the social group or whatnot, like you're, not everybody, right, but it's like the bystander effect, even like, more pronounced. It's like you're not really able to kind of like be a bit more honest about the things that you believe, and so I really do feel like that there is often some backlash that comes when you leave a group. And so how did you navigate that backlash when you faced your detransition?
I think that is like a major problem in the culture right now, for sure. There's a lot of people who don't really feel called for whatever reason to speak against wrong or ill will, even when they see it, out of fear of backlash, which I think for young people, especially teenagers and people in their 20s, you don't really want to rock the boat. Like you want to maintain your friendships as best as possible, and you don't really want to upset anybody or offend anybody or like risk your relationships. I feel like it's especially exacerbated in the age of social media, where nothing goes unseen. Like you can't get away with any mistakes or even just things that people see in their eyes as offensive. But I've also seen a major challenging of that in recent years, and especially in the last few weeks, of people just like seeing what has happened and deciding that it's more worth it to speak up than to stay silent. And how that came about for me personally, I mean, I kind of always have been somebody who has gone against the grain in different ways, in different areas of my life. And I think both going through the initial bullying that I went through when I started transitioning in middle school, and the much worse treatment I got when I detransitioned in my last year of high school, it really teed me up for the conversations that I was going to have next. It was, again, a total trial by fire, going through some of the worst parts of my life, being judged incredibly harshly for it, and then learning, you know what? No matter what I do, whether I fit in or whether I don't, people are always going to have something to say about it. So why shouldn't I just continue going forward and speaking for my values and speaking for the truth and speaking against wrongdoing when I see it? And in doing so, I also learned that when you do that, it encourages other people to do the same. And it's not just the change that comes forth from speaking against wrongdoing that makes it worth it. It's also that community building and helping to build up other people and encouraging them to do the same thing that makes it worth it too.
Thank you. Second question. I remember, growing up, I want to say I wasn't born in the 80s, right? But it was popular for like the new wave station to kind of play like a song called "You Spin Me Right Around" with a dude named Pete Burns, and he was like, he was a guy who eventually transitioned way back in like the 80s, and he was responsible for a lot of this music and whatever. And then growing up, it was almost like a social thing for everybody to kind of watch, like, things like RuPaul's Drag Race and all of those things. And I'm not directly going to blame that, but I will say that I just, when like a lot of things were happening on like Tumblr and like old MySpace, and they were getting rid of a lot of content.
R.I.P. MySpace.
Yeah. it's like then all of a sudden, like you're like seeing this exacerbation of just this rhetoric, like, oh, I don't feel comfortable in my body, and then we really started to get like shows on, I forgot what that one show was called, but like it was about this child who transitioned early, and it was really like, yes, and it was really like people were doing it for the camera, and I don't want to go around, and start to hate folks, for their choices, but at the same time, part of speaking out for me, is struggling to acknowledge, when things are done for the preservation of like a social status, or just to get these non-existent social points, or like when to call out my like friends and be like, hey, like, you're more than just a trend that is happening. And I don't want to say like that it's like a trend now, right? But it could be this now, and tomorrow, like, it's like a whole another thing, and to be able to kind of call that out and to have those difficult conversations, I do find some difficulty in managing that with some friends of mine, and so I just wanted to know if there were any tips that I could possibly take away here.
For sure, and I mean, I think that there is value in trying to gain respect from our peers, but that's not something that you should pursue when it comes at the expense of either yourself or the people around you. I think if you maintain a good character, if you speak the truth, even in times where you might get a lot of backlash for it, people will see that. People will see your character, and that will slowly but surely build up the way that the people around you see you and respect you, I think. And it's interesting that you brought up Tumblr and how like all those communities online just really quickly started to shift towards like these more towards identity politics. And I mean, I think it kind of coincides with a time where like I think a lot of just within the last decades, people have they've started to lose their moral compass and really scramble more and more to find what they believe in, what they stand for, what their purpose is. And I think that's exactly why, like, alongside like these fan bases, right, where like TV shows and musicians and stuff, a lot of people have also come together to try and find that community and identity with each other under the guise of under the influence of identity politics.
Thank you for the answered question. And also, last one, this is completely like the joke here, but it's not on topic, but in the spirit of Charlie Kirk, do you prefer pancakes or waffles?
I'm not really a sweet breakfast kind of person, which is really funny because I have a really bad sweet tooth. I actually need to get dental work done soon. But if I had to choose, I mean, I think I would go for waffles because I like the shape, I like the texture. They have like those little pockets on the surface where you can like, the butter can melt in, like the syrup can like go into. And if you don't want to have a sweet breakfast, you can have chicken and waffles.
Good answer. Thanks for coming down. I'm glad.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Hi, hello. So a little bit of change in conversation compared to trains. I'm from Corpus Christi, so I'm about 2 hours from the border. And so coming to here at Texas State, I've learned a lot of people who see immigration differently from what I have experienced. Over the last 10 years or so, I've seen Corpus get more violent, and the city has definitely changed. How would you help people understand the dangers of what was previously open border policies and letting people kind of come into the nation unregulated, and kind of what might be the dangers that be associated with that?
It's a really exciting question, actually, because nobody really, I mean, obviously, like my area of focus is generally the gender issue as well as other social issues and a little bit of evangelism. But I mean, I'm actually a second-generation immigrant. My mother came here from the Philippines with her family when she was about 3 or 4 years old, I think, to pursue a better life. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that many of the people who are emigrating here en masse now are much, much different than the people who have been immigrating here over the decades.
My
They don't
great-grandfather
respect-
was
they don't
also an immigrant as well, which I found out recently. And so I've met a lot of immigrant families that are good people, good values.
For sure.
But, obviously, when it's not regulated, anybody can come in, not only, people from South America, but possibly other countries all over the world.
Absolutely. Many of these people coming here, especially those who are coming in illegally, breaking the law the moment they cross our borders, they don't respect our values. They don't respect us as citizens. They don't respect what our country stands for. And that's why so many of them have threatened our communities. Many of them align with radical, for example, Islamist ideologies, and they actively seek to destroy the West and everything that we stand for. We absolutely need to be vetting who is coming into our country and observing them not only why they're coming here, but their motivations in doing so.
My mother's a nurse, and she worked with immigrants that were held in detention centers. And during that time, she learned a lot about, kind of the travels that the people would go through immigrating illegally, working with coyotes, and some of the dangers that older women and younger women deal with, sexual assault, violence, and so it's sad to. It's sad to see and hear all these stories of people getting taken advantage of while trying to look for a better life, and that's what people come here for the most part. And so it's just, how can we help everyone understand that although some people may see it as a human right to be able to immigrate into countries, but it's also a right that should be earned and gone through the due process.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on that. If you are not a citizen of this country, you do not have the same rights as a citizen. Now, I do think that we should have a fair process for people to get in who are looking for a better life and seek to improve not only their own lives and their families' lives, but also to bring something to our country. But we can't let our empathy be suicidal to us as a nation. We cannot compromise on our values and on our safety.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello.
Hi. I don't really have a question, sorry. I just wanted to say thank you because when I was in high school, I struggled a lot with my gender identity and who I was as a person. And you kind of talked some sense into me, made me realize that I am a woman, and now I'm doing much better. I'm very secure in my womanhood. So I just want to say thank you so much for everything, for talking some sense into me. Thank you so much.
And I have to thank you for listening to my message. Was it gender dysphoria that you were struggling with?
Yes.
It's not easy to come around to the other conclusion that you're not going to find happiness in transition. But I also think it takes a great deal of personal strength and humility to recognize that. And I think you have a lot of credit to give yourself there. And you're a beautiful woman.
Thank
Don't
you so
forget
much.
it.
Thank you.
So I've noticed that when people talk about those who are transgender, they often bring biblical text in as a way to kind of prove their point that transgenderism is not socially acceptable. I'd like to argue that standpoint because in the Talmud, which is biblical text, there are actually 8 genders that are stated throughout. The first is zachar, which is typically understood as male. The next is nekeva, typically understood as female. Androgynous, a person possessing both female and male characteristics. Tumtum, a person whose sexual characteristics are not externally apparent or indeterminate, or otherwise known as intersex. Ailonit, a person identified as female at birth, but who does not develop secondary male characteristics. Saris, a person identified as male at birth, but does not develop secondary male characteristics. Ailonit Hama, a natural inherent female to male transition. And Saris Adam, a natural inherent male to female transition.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a Christian, and the Talmud is a Jewish scriptural text.
Yes,
I don't
it
follow
is.
the teachings of it.
Yes, it is, but it still has applications to Christians.
There is some crossover, considering that we share the text of the Torah, but I am not Jewish, and I don't follow. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's essentially a series of arguments between different Jewish theologians over a few centuries, right? So, I mean, there are a lot of Jews even that don't follow that particular belief, and most of the Jews who I know do not believe in that.
The Talmud it's just a series of texts written by rabbis throughout.
Right, of their own personal interpretations of the Torah,
Yes.
right?
Yes, correct. So I just wanted to know your opinion on that, since there is typically a biblical, saying. My other point that I want to talk about is suicide rates amongst those who get gender-affirming care, and the fact that, sorry, I have my notes on my phone, that's why I'm looking at my phone, sorry. And that, according to the Human Rights Campaign, currently 39.4% of transgender youth live in states that have passed bans on gender-affirming care. And I want to know what's your opinion on that.
Could you repeat that again?
39.4% of transgender youth live in states that have passed bans on gender-affirming care.
39.4% of transgender youth live in states that don't have these treatments?
Yes.
Okay.
What is your opinion on that? Like, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with that?
I mean, what's the statement supposed to be here? Just that there's a lot of kids who live in states where it's not accessible?
Do you believe that that's like an okay thing that's happening?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, and I've actually worked with a lot of those states to introduce that legislation to remove, to ban this, to ban those procedures in use of children. I've also worked with those states to create provisions as well that make it so that their healthcare providers, in place of the gender-affirming care model, will use more holistic, more psychological healthcare-focused approaches to gender dysphoria.
So, in response to that, with this lack of access to gender-affirming care, there is a statistical tie to transgender youth getting this care and suicide rates. And at least in my opinion, based off of statistics, when you take away this care, suicide rates will continue to go up in transgender youth. And in fact, 30% of transgender youth have attempted suicide in the past year. And it is statistically proven that when these transgender youth get the health care that they need concerning the fact that they are transgender, the suicide rates do go down.
Yes, that's why I want to ensure with these states that are passing these bans on this form of treatment that they will replace it instead with something that is more developmentally appropriate and more focused on their overall quality of life, and especially in regards to their mental health. I don't think that what is causing these children to be suicidal is their bodies, because most of them are completely perfectly healthy. What they are experiencing is a psychological phenomenon, and that is what they ultimately need help with.
Yes, but also, no, because there are many instances where people who are transgender, they can get mental health care as much mental health care as they could possibly get, but because
What does that look like? Is it just a lot of time when people in these studies or in these or speaking about the clinical applications of this, when they say mental health care, what that really looks like is just affirming them in this idea that they are transgender, rather than looking at the overall history of their life, any trauma, other comorbid conditions, and helping them through processing the connection with that and the feelings of incongruence and discomfort with their sex. So, which is the model that we used to follow with great success.
So, a lot of my friends are actually transgender, and the things that help them the most are actually not just mental health care, but are things that kind of affirm them in the way that they physically look. But whether that's using binders, whether that's changing their haircuts or their clothing or whatever it may be. And also, I have a friend who has also used puberty blockers, and this person has not had any adverse reactions to this, and it has helped them greatly in their mental health and the way that they view themselves.
I want to hear more about this person. How old were they, how long were they on it, and how old are they now?
I don't know a lot of the specifics, so I mean, it's their healthcare, but I know that they, I believe, started around 10, but this could be wrong.
So that's probably like before 10 or stage 3, which when you block puberty before a certain stage of it, I mean, that person is probably not going to have any children of their own. They're probably never going to, they're probably going to go into, if they're an adult, they're probably completely sterile with absolutely no ability to have kids or sexual function. Do you believe that that is a reasonable trade-off just to look a certain way?
Well, yes, because it's not just looking a certain way, it's care, it's health care.
What is health care about that? What is health care about removing healthy function and preventing somebody from going through the only process through which they can fully mature into adulthood? How is that health care?
So this ties back to those suicide rates. This most likely helped my friend to not have to deal with the other mental health problems that are going to later on affect them because they weren't able to get that access to that health care. And on the topic of not being able to give birth, that's actually, like, not everybody wants to give birth, even biological women. Like,
sure, not everybody wants to have children of their own, but fertility is associated with much more than just one's ability to have kids. It's our sexual health is tied into every single other aspect of our health. So this person, I don't know how old they are. I'm assuming that they're probably around like the 18, 20-ish range, right?
Yes.
That is not nearly enough time to fully appreciate the consequences of this treatment, of having their puberty blocked. They might be perfectly healthy now, but what are the results that we're going to see in 5 years for that person, in 10 years, over the decades? People who have gone through, that person might as well essentially have gone through a childhood equivalent of menopause. And I know because I've actually been through treatments, and they put me through, and they essentially put me through a menopause as well. And I'm seeing complications from that, and they're slowly racking up towards over the years as I get older.
You can see.
You mentioned the suicide rates as well.
Yes.
Did you know that there is actually an ACLU lawyer who is transgender who has looked over a lot of the medical literature and statistics on this and admitted in court earlier this year that suicide rates in transgender identified children are nearly non-existent? That is exceedingly rare.
If it's exceedingly rare, why is it 40% in their entire life have committed suicide and 30%?
The statistic that you're quoting, I believe, is from a study of adults. It's not on children.
No, it's from adults and children.
What is it that, which study are you quoting?
Access to human affirming care associated with lower suicide risk for transgender youth from the Williams Institute, UCLA School of Law.
And does it differentiate between those who have been treated and those who haven't been?
Yes.
So I think that, yes, in the children who have been treated, there may be temporarily lower suicide rates, but what is the span of time that this has been conducted?
Let me see. Let me check that real quick.
Because that is a major issue with a lot of these studies. They will bring they'll have positive conclusions. They will say that there are lower suicide rates, that the rates of mental health conditions will go down over a period of time, but they're often conducted within just a few months or just a few years after treatment. And it's understood that regrets and feelings of regrets or being able to fully appreciate the damages that come from a medical transition generally take between about 7 to 10 years, if not longer than a decade actually, for a person to process.
So I'm looking at it right now. It doesn't say necessarily a time frame because this was sorry, 1 second. It was through a research, like, kind of, what is it called?
Like a survey?
Yeah, survey, thank you. Sorry, I forgot the name. My bad. Yeah, it was through a survey. It was published September 1st in 2021, so that kind of gives you some time frame on where these statistics are kind of falling from. And yeah, that's really all I can really completely find on it, but it does talk about people who are adults versus those who are children. I do have another study from the National Library of Medicine that does specifically comment on those statistics between adults versus children.
Okay. And there is something that I do want to speak on, and it's that I'll even say in my own experience, during about the first year that I was medically transitioning, I thought that I was happier. I felt like I started to look more like a man, and I was, moving through the motions of learning male socialization was something that I thought I was happy with for a while. But again, time changes things. The way that anybody feels about any major life decision that they make is going to change over the course of a year, the course of 3 years, 5 years, and throughout the decades. It's not something that is going to be constant. Just because somebody says that they're satisfied one moment doesn't mean that they're going to be satisfied the next. And emotions are fleeting. This is really the only area of medicine that is based pretty much entirely on emotions rather than looking at the overall quality of life in these patients. What about what's happening to their bodies? What about what they're going through socially? How is this affecting their health in the long run? I think that we should be including that in the studies on success rates in transition.
So you're talking a lot about people who are detransitioning, and I know that you said that you detransitioned. So I feel like it's kind of, in a way, not fair to apply your personal experience to people, all those who are transgender, because the statistics of people who actually detransitioned is less than 1%.
Well, that isn't fair. I went through the same process.
So many other people who have transitioned are experiencing a increase in their life and like the happiness that they're experiencing, while only 1% of people are actually regretting this. And does that 1% kind of, is that 1% more important than the 99% who are receiving this health care?
Well, we don't know the actual statistics of people who have detransitioned because different studies have different conclusions, and many of them are actually not even looking at those of us who have chosen to permanently detransition. And there just isn't a lot of literature right now focusing on the experiences or the reasoning behind detransition. But I think that there is a story to learn from everybody's experience, even if they don't necessarily align with that of another person. I mean, I have tried to this day. I still have many friends who are in the transgender community, many of whom I have worked alongside, and just in different areas of my life. I learned things from them. And I think that there should be there should ultimately be an open discussion between people of different experiences, between people of different creeds and walks of life. And when one person, if even one person, which, I mean, there's thousands of people out there who have detransitioned, if even one of us has experienced a catastrophic failure like this in our treatment, we should all be looking at that and looking at what went wrong to make sure that it doesn't happen ever again.
So then my response to that is if even one person on puberty blockers has, had a significant increase in their happiness of life, then we should be looking at that, shouldn't we?
Well, I disagree with the premise of that, because I think that inherently the use of these treatments in children is destructive. And at the very least, we should be waiting until they are of age, until they are adults, they are the age of majority, to even consider thinking about things that will be life-changing and directly influence the course of their life and every single part of it from that point on.
So if we're going to take that kind of standpoint, let's apply it to other kinds of healthcare. You could apply that to getting let's say getting an organ removed at a young age. You could apply that to getting put on birth control or other medications, because I have been put on medications for mental health that still to this day affect me. So why are we focusing so hard on transgender youth and the healthcare that is helping them have a better quality of life rather than all of healthcare?
Well, for me personally, it's my area of expertise, but many people are concerned about it because it's the very opposite of healthcare. It's causing direct harm to our children, to our families, to our communities, and I think it's an imminent issue that we should be focusing on. And while having compassion for these people in their experiences, in their distress, and joining in their lives, helping them as a community into a better way of life.
All right, that's really all I have to say today. But thank you for talking with me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a lot of height differences here, don't we? We keep having to adjust the microphone. Would it be better to maybe just off? Okay.